All right, just a suggestion via Discord. The name of the video is How do German schools teach about WW2? Guys, I'm going to go ahead and just be completely honest here. I'm going to go ahead and forecast that they're going to be real. Like, there's no point lying about what happened, bro. There's 0 point. Like, the world already looks at them like, a little awkwardly, let's say. But I'm thinking that they're going to be as honest as humanly possible, so we don't basically recreate what was the root cause, let's say, of WW2. So I'm going to forecast it. Name of the channel the video is coming from is Today I Found Out. Let's check it out.
Brought to you by CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream is a subscription streaming service that offers over 2,000 documentaries and non-fiction titles from some of the world's best filmmakers, including exclusive originals. Now, if you're interested in this video, Curiosity...
Code. All right, so guys, here's a code right here. If this is your thing, brain food. But all right, let's jump into it.
In 4 parts, and to top it all, coming face to face with the scale of the atrocities their government and armies committed through public events like the Nuremberg trials. This, in combination with the process of denazification, which can be seen as a large-scale rehabilitation program, and the regaining of independence, albeit as 2 states, helped the German people in the 50s to begin looking towards the future, burying the past. It was not just a lost war, which people can accept while still feeling proud about their deeds during it, as perhaps the French used to view Napoleon's efforts, which ended in defeat, or Austria's defeats in the 7 Years' War. Rather, in this case, the sensation after the war seems to have been similar to a person regaining their senses after having committed acts of violence under the influence, akin to a crowd cheering for a football team or other such instances of mob mentality, which all humans are susceptible. Naturally, given all the revelations after the war and the atrocities committed, the Germans collectively wanted nothing more than to forget and focus on new goals. First, the economy, which led to the German economic miracle, and then on the foundation of the European Union, of which in the coming decades it would arguably become the leading country. But what about the history books in school? After all, typical after any conflict, whether a given side is the winner or the loser, the history taught in schools tends to be coloured to favour one's own people. This, however, could not happen in Germany. The reasons for this were varied, from making sure something like that couldn't happen again, and of course the scale of the atrocities on a global level and the small time gap that separates us from those events and how well documented those events are.
And guys, and that's the thing, like, they can't hide from this. They can't run from this. And the last thing you really want to do is kind of like sugarcoat exactly what happened during WW2. So I think if you're going to move on as a collective society, you're going to have to come to terms with what happened and then obviously move on through it, because you cannot live on this very diverse planet in the manner that the mustache man basically wanted the planet to be, guys. You can't live like that.
Time gap that separates us from those events and how well documented those events are. This brings us to the broad strokes of how this particular conflict was and is taught in German schools. We should point out here that in Germany, the education system is regulated not by the federal government, but independently in each of the 16 states that constitute the German Federal Republic, or BRD. So the way history is taught, although generally falling within the same lines, can vary a lot from region to region. For example, the choice of literature used in the various classes differs greatly, not only from year to year, but also from federal state to federal state. That caveat out of the way, the study of the war period and how this is viewed in German schools can be generally divided into 4 parts. The first, the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic, at least its beginnings, are generally viewed positively. It is seen as a first decent effort towards democratization, despite the problems that it faced in the aftermath of World War I. The various problems culminating in the economic crisis of the late 20s and the subsequent rise of the Nazi regime are dealt with in detail, emphasizing the mistakes that would lead to the fall of the democratic system. One would say that the Weimar Republic, despite the brevity of its existence, is viewed with a certain nostalgic sentiment, accompanied by the looming threat of what was to come. And that is not just the war, but the Nazis themselves and their ideology. Nazi ideology and atrocities. Head-on, the students are confronted with the crushing effects of totalitarian regimes, radical ideologies, and where these can lead. In addition to photo and video documentaries, most schools organize mandatory school trips to Holocaust memorials, usually former concentration camps. This does not only apply to history class. Students are also introduced to the works of literature tackling the issue of Nazism and ethnic hate in Europe at the time. This can include, but is not limited to, authors such as Bertolt Brecht and Thomas Mann. Additionally, Jewish voices voices are amplified in terms of Jewish poetry, reports from survivors, and historical documentaries focusing on the long-term consequences of hate and violence.
Yeah, that's definitely expected. 100%.
Survivors and historical documentaries focusing on the long-term consequences of hate and violence.
I think it's very fair.
Some of the literature choices indicate that the schools try to emphasize the aspects of humanity and also the problem of group mentality and prejudice, as seen in works such as the post-war play Andorra by Max Frisch and more recent works such as The Boy in the Striped Pajamas from 2006 by John Boyne and The Reader by Bernhard Schlink. They also look at the diaries of Anne Frank. Excerpts of pro-Nazi texts are also studied once the students are deemed mature enough to handle this. In this vein, excerpts from Mein Kampf are tackled in advanced history class, stressing the contradictions within the text, what contemporary citizens might have identified with, and the lack of morality therein. Interestingly, as if to complement Nazi ideology with a similar type of prejudice, the other major topic focused on intensely is that of slavery, racism, and segregation in America. The war itself. Remarkably, the details of...
Like, guys, please don't think for a moment like that. Like, the ideology still does not like float around Germany. I wouldn't say that in this form, no. But are there still some of those people that still idolize this man? Absolutely. Is the swastika completely banned there? Absolutely. But what I've noticed, at least, like traveling through Germany, I've seen like a couple of like Southern Confederate flags. Oddly, I'm guessing they're utilizing that flag as this, if that makes any sense. They're basically using it in place of the swastika at times, I guess. This is only like 2 occasions I've seen it within my last couple of times traveling to Germany, but out into the rural areas.
Racism and segregation in America. The war itself. Remarkably, the details of the fields of war are often underplayed in German schools. A possible reason for this is that showing maps of expanding German territory during the first 2 years of the war and discussing their winning battles might cause encouragement of nationalistic pride, which seems counterproductive to many given the points that educators are trying to teach. Furthermore, the discussion of the details of each...
And guys, the reason why they didn't touch Spain, obviously, because Franco was there. And Franco and the Mustache Man were basically like best friends, kind of along with like Mussolini. But this is the reason why they didn't really encroach much at all into España, guys. But anyway,
given the points that educators are trying to teach. Furthermore, the discussion of the details of each battle that Rommel won or lost in Africa, or the supply problems on the Eastern Front, are not vital to the analysis of the atrocities of the Nazi regime. Another more practical aspect is that already much time has been allocated to the subject of war anyway, so they cut down on the actual battles. Of course, one downside of de-emphasizing this is many German students are never really made aware of many specific military events and conquests, since most emphasis in school is put on the internal developments, theoretical or philosophical aspects, and of course on the ideology and practice of ethnic cleansing and the ruthlessness to other groups of people seen as ethnic, cultural, or political outcasts, such as Jews, homosexuals, communists, etc. There is...
All right, so here's my problem with the statement, though. I mean, I get it. This is true. I'm not going to go ahead and really go against Simon Whistler's thesis here. Right? I'm never going to do that. But the problem with, I guess, what I'm hearing is that so they're teaching them obviously what not to do ever again, but you're not actually teaching the concept of like history. Like, I think we probably know more of the conquests of Germany into Europe than they may at times, because not, that's what it seems like. That's what it sounds like, at least what I'm encountering. We know more of the individual like wild battles around Europe, it seems. What it sounds like, at least.
The result is that the military developments of war are understated, as alluded to. The result is that, shockingly, many German students are actually surprised to learn things like that Germans invaded places like modern Ukraine, modern Serbia, and Greece. In contrast to these broader war strokes, resistance against the Nazi regime within Germany is heralded as an example of heroism and bravery, one such example being the siblings Sophie and Hans Scholl, members of the resistance group The White Rose. Such examples allow German students to find figures from the wartime with whom they can identify with. On this note, not every regular German who lived in the 1930s and 40s is painted as a terrible person. After all, when dealing with such a large group, as in any populace, there are plenty of good people and a percentage of bad. That said, given all that happened, a large emphasis is put on even most of the good people being complicit in the atrocities by looking away and not doing anything to stop it.
Yeah, but guys, those stories are still important, though. I mean, it basically says that not every single person actually kind of fell into the ideology of the mustache man. Yes, were they complicit? In fact, they did nothing to stop it. They were just living their life, right? Taking care of their family, most likely. They were just there. Are they equally as guilty? I mean, to be honest, yeah, a little bit, right? But they also had to live, guys.
Defeat in post-war.
Those
the major
stories are
destructions in Germany and the high cost of human lives during the war is not attributed to the Allies, but rather to the Nazi regime itself, which is being viewed as the perpetrator in starting an unnecessary war in the first place. Furthermore, most of the destruction on German soil was inflicted in the last year of the war. The obstinacy of not surrendering, even as it was clear that the outcome of the war would be negative, is seen as proof of the minimal care the Nazis expressed toward their own people. The suicide of members of the party, such as Himmler and Hitler himself, is seen as an act of cowardice on their part. Thus, rather unique in history, the opposing forces who were victorious are not generally seen in a negative light by those they defeated. Far from it. On that note, the occupation of the German cities by the Allied army is characterized as liberation. This is despite, of course, the fact that the Allied soldiers at the time didn't seemingly view the race to Berlin as a race to free Berlin. The choice of words, however, comes with the emphasis that by losing the war, the German people were freed from Nazism. An interesting example comes from alternative history broadcasts that contemplate a world after supposed German victory. These paint a horrific dystopia in which the Germans, as well as the occupied people, would be suppressed by a ruthless Nazi regime. The 8th of May is therefore known as the Day of Liberation. Making parallels to the way the European Renaissance supposedly liberated the medieval people, the liberation as well as the denazification process led to an internal catharsis among Germans concerning Nazism. Reflecting all of this in popular German cinema, German war films, especially in the last few decades, tend to deal with the subject with honesty, showing the gradual shift to madness caused by hollow mass delusions, often in a tone more fatalistic than heroic. Therefore, they can be much deeper than a typical war movie, and if you're up for that, you might enjoy work such as the Generation War miniseries. There's also the movie The Fall, perhaps mostly known thanks to the most memified Hitler scene ever. Of course, one major issue of all this in the way it's taught in schools and extreme emphasis placed on this period of history is the subject of imposed collective responsibility on modern Germans, even if just implied or felt rather than ever explicitly stated. At first glance, it is good to study these events in great detail to make sure they don't happen again. However, an issue for Germans, of course, is the sense of collective responsibility, despite no student today or their parents or even potentially their grandparents having anything to do with any of that.
Valid.
How much weight does the idea of original sin have? How is a person born in the 2000s responsible for the Nazi atrocities?
None.
It is still heavily frowned upon to display the modern-day German flag, despite officially and explicitly not being a Nazi symbol. On a similar note, a
Guys, as a matter of fact, let's write it out.
nationalistic displays such as pledging allegiance to the flag during class every morning would have the worst possible connotations in Germany, despite being common in places like the United States. Furthermore, there is a high percentage of population with immigrant heritage. Just look at the German national football team. As you might expect from all of this, there is some concern that the German school systems may go too far with the seeming obsession with the Nazis and all the mistakes that they were making, instead of spending more time on broader history, as is more typical in other nations. Whatever one's opinion on that, as an interesting little side note, the German denazification process was considered such a success that decades later Americans sought to apply the same methodology after occupying Iraq. Unsurprisingly, that was not exactly successful. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did...
Alright guys, appreciate it. Appreciate the story here. A lot of new information. I never actually thought about exactly what they would actually be teaching. I just basically figured immediately that they're going to be as real as humanly possible. Now, when it comes to like the subject of patriotism, well, I was about to stop about a minute ago here, but when it comes to the subject of patriotism, I always found it odd, right? Mainly looking, guys, hold on. Mainly looking through the lens of an American looking at other countries. Other countries do not like their flag. And then so when they see, it seems like at least, like whenever they see their flag, they immediately think that it's something nefarious, it's something that represents like fascism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, for example, I live half the year in Spain, and most Spaniards would not at all fly their flag because it reminds them of Franco. Franco, best friends with the mustache man. Remember that, right? And then Germany, I'm guessing, is the same similar thing. And a lot of the other countries, specifically in Europe, some of the Nordic countries also, they all kind of feel the same way about their flag. And I always found it odd and moderately interesting how they comment on us in the United States of America, like representing our flag. You understand what I'm saying here? And they're just like, you guys are weird. Why are there so many flags everywhere? Like once or twice a year, we bring one of my wife's family members, depending on where we are, to the United States of America. And their experience is always pretty much similar. Why are there so many flags everywhere? Guys, we love our country, right? It may seem fanatical. It seems cultish to them and things like that, but I wouldn't trade it, bro. I'm sorry. I wouldn't trade it at all. Yes. I guess the main, I'm going to end the video here, guys, but what I do find the most interesting is that they basically are doing exactly what I thought they were doing. So that's a good thing, I guess, right? But the people that are alive, obviously, today are not really to blame for what was done back then, guys, right? I mean, obviously, you need to learn about it. It's incredibly important to know your history, but if the main curriculum is exclusively, hey, you did this, but they didn't do that. Or like, people in this country did this, so everyone is to blame. That's a little wild. Let's not do that. So that, like, if you're not trying to, like, you're not making it better by doing that, basically is what I'm trying to say here. You're probably making it worse. Okay. You're probably creating people like that. You get what I mean here? Everyone needs information. Everyone needs some type of base knowledge to basically, to know that it's wrong, obviously, but you can't just sit here and persecute all of these, 1996 babies and 86 babies and 76 babies. You get what I'm saying here? You can't do that. They had nothing to do with it. They weren't even thought about. They were still swimming in their, I'm not even going to do that. That's crazy. But all right, listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day, thoroughly. The fact that you just made it to the end of the video says a whole lot, actually. We have a couple other channels. MrLboyd Music, MrLboyd Movie Reacts, along with MrLboyd Discusses, where I just generally speak about the things that specifically matter to me. But in the meantime, I'll catch you guys later.